So Qatar getting into the visa waiver program, huh?
Yeah,
That's got to be a pretty big deal, right?
it is.
You don't see an Arab nation getting that kind of access every day.
Yeah, it's definitely noteworthy.
So you've been digging into this. What makes it so significant?
Well, you're looking at a fascinating case study and how these seemingly small shifts in international relations, like a visa waiver program, can actually reveal these much larger trends in diplomacy, economics, and cultural exchange.
Okay, so for those of us maybe who need a quick refresher,
Yeah.
what is the visa waiver program and why is it such a big deal that Qatar just got added?
Right. So the U.S. visa waiver program, it's essentially an exclusive club.
Okay.
Citizens of certain countries can travel to the U.S. for tourism or business for up to 90 days without a visa.
Right.
They get to bypass a lot of those bureaucratic hurdles. And right now, there are only about 40 countries on that list,
Wow.
mostly in Europe and Asia.
Okay.
So for Qatar to be the first Arab nation included, that's a pretty significant signal.
A signal of what exactly?
Well, I think you can think of it as a vote of confidence on the world stage.
Okay.
It's a very public acknowledgement of Qatar's rising global influence.
Okay.
It strengthens the U.S. Qatar relationship, and it implicitly recognizes Qatar as a key player, not just in the Middle East, but globally. And, look at their hosting of the FIFA World Cup in 2022. I mean,
Right.
that put them in a global spotlight.
Yeah, the World Cup definitely put Qatar on the map, I think, for a lot of people. But
For sure.
I'm guessing this visa waiver is about a much bigger strategy.
Exactly.
with the event.
Qatar has been very strategically positioning itself as a diplomatic hub.
Okay.
They're hosting major international conferences like the World Trade Organization Ministerial Conference back in 2013.
Right.
And they've played a key role in mediating regional conflicts.
Oh.
For example, helping to negotiate a ceasefire between the Afghan government and the Taliban in 2020.
Wow.
So this visa waiver, it's another step in cementing that commitment to global engagement and cooperation.
Okay, so that covers the diplomacy angle.
Yeah.
What about the economic implications?
Right.
I know our initial source material, the Global Insights podcast, touched on that too.
Right. Easier travel equals smoother business transactions.
Yeah.
So now Qatari entrepreneurs, investors, even people just attending conferences can travel to the U.S. without the hassle of visa applications.
Right.
That's a direct path to stronger economic ties, more investment opportunities, and potentially a whole lot of new business deals.
Fewer barriers, smoother transactions. It's pretty clear why that matters.
Absolutely.
It's not just about high-level diplomacy, though, is it?
Exactly. Think about the everyday traveler.
Okay.
Tourists, students, families visiting each other.
Yeah.
This makes things so much easier.
Right.
And remember how Qatar Airways was one of the few airlines that maintained direct flights to the U.S. during the pandemic?
Oh, right. I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah.
I bet that played a role somehow.
It definitely reinforces the existing relationship.
Uh-huh.
Their willingness to maintain those connections during a global crisis really cemented their status as a reliable partner.
Okay.
And it highlighted their existing travel infrastructure.
Right.
This visa waiver just strengthens those connections, making it even easier for people to travel between the two nations.
Which leads to more people-to-people interactions,
Yeah.
more cultural exchange.
Exactly.
Which is usually a good thing, right?
More often than not, yes.
Yeah.
When people can experience other cultures firsthand, it tends to foster more understanding and break down stereotypes.
Right.
This type of exchange can be really powerful.
This is painting a pretty positive picture.
Sure.
But this isn't just a free pass into the U.S., is it?
Right.
There are some serious standards Qatar had to meet to get into this exclusive club, right?
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
The U.S. has incredibly strict security and counterterrorism requirements for the visa waiver program.
Right.
So Qatar's inclusion really points to their commitment to meeting those standards.
Yeah.
Enhancing security cooperation and proving themselves as a reliable partner in combating global threats.
It sounds like a win-win situation so far. What about the larger implications of this?
Right.
Does it go beyond just the U.S. and Qatar?
Yeah.
The podcast we heard mentioned something about setting a precedent.
That's an important point. This isn't just about a bilateral agreement.
Right.
Think about it. What if Qatar's inclusion in the visa waiver program paves the way for other Arab or Gulf nations to join?
Right.
It has the potential to really reshape regional dynamics, foster greater cooperation, and maybe even help ease long-standing tensions.
That's a fascinating thought. What would it actually take for other countries to follow in Qatar's footsteps?
Well, as we said, the U.S. has those non-negotiable security standards.
Okay.
And then, of course, there are a lot of political considerations, economic factors, even things like passport security and visa refusal rates that all factor into the decision.
So it's more nuanced than just checking boxes. It's about proving yourself as a reliable and trustworthy partner.
Exactly. And that's why Qatar's inclusion is so noteworthy.
Okay.
It sets a new bar, a new standard for other countries in the region to aspire to.
I'm beginning to understand why this news about a visa waiver seems so simple on the surface, but actually has such depth.
For sure.
It's like a domino effect, potentially triggering larger shifts in international relations.
Yes, and it's important to remember those shifts don't happen in a vacuum.
Right.
Global politics is an intricate web of interconnected parts.
Right.
What happens in one area will likely have ripple effects elsewhere.
That's a great analogy. What do you think we should be looking at in the coming months and years? How do you see this playing out?
For one thing, keep an eye on how other countries in the region react to this development. Will they see it as a threat or an opportunity?
Right.
Will they step up their own efforts to strengthen ties with the U.S.?
It'll be interesting to see those dynamics start to unfold.
Yeah.
It's like a whole new game of diplomatic chess just started, and Qatar made a pretty bold opening move.
Right, and it's not just about governments and diplomats.
Okay.
Pay attention to business deals, cultural exchanges, even tourism trends.
Okay.
Those can be early indicators of deeper shifts in international relations.
Okay, so pay attention to those seemingly small details because they might point to something much bigger on the horizon. What a great point. Any final thoughts for our listener today?
Sure.
Something to think about as they navigate this complex world?
Here's something I find fascinating.
Yeah.
Don't underestimate the power of connection. In a world that often feels increasingly divided, things like this visa waiver program highlight how important it is to build bridges, foster understanding, and recognize our interconnectedness.
That's a really great point.
Yeah.
It's like you said, it's a good reminder that even in this complex world of international relations, sometimes a little human connection can make a big difference.
Absolutely. And for anyone listening who wants to go even deeper on this, I'd suggest maybe looking at the potential economic implications. Will we see an increase in U.S. investment in Qatar or vice versa?
Right.
Will this lead to more partnerships between businesses in both countries? These are interesting questions to consider.
Yeah, you've given us a lot to consider today. This has been really eye-opening, so thanks for taking us on this deep dive.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Always a pleasure to have you.
Always glad to dig into these topics.
Until next time.
Sounds good.